Wired.com presents The Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. And here is your host, David Barr Kirtley.
Hello, and welcome to episode 281 of Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. Today on the show, we'll be discussing the TV show Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency, based on the novels by Douglas Adams. And this will include spoilers for the entire first season, so just be aware of that. And I'm joined by three guests. So first up, we've got our producer, John Joseph Adams. He's the editor of Lightspeed and Nightmare magazines, and he also oversees John Joseph Adams Books, an imprint of Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. He's the series editor of The Best American Science Fiction and Fantasy, and he's also edited many other anthologies, including the recent books Cosmic Powers and What the Bleep Is That? So John, welcome back.
Always good to be here.
Then next up, we've got Leah Schnelbach. She's a staff writer for Tor.com and a fiction editor of the No Tokens Journal, and her fiction appears in journals such as Joyland, Volume 1 Brooklyn, and Madcap Review. Her criticism has appeared in Speculative Fiction 2015, The Crooked Timber Symposium, and Electric Literature, and she holds an MFA in fiction from Sarah Lawrence College. So Leah, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
And also joining us today is Tom Gerencer. His short fiction appears in magazines such as Galaxy's Edge and Realms of Fantasy, and in books such as New Voices in Science Fiction and I, Alien. He's a former whitewater professional who ran his own video production business for 8 years, and he currently writes articles on money, nutrition, resumes, medical waste, and lifestyle. So Tom, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here.
Okay, and so I want to start with Tom, because Tom, you were one of the biggest Douglas Adams fans that I know. And you actually met Douglas Adams, right? So can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I was living in London on a postgraduate fellowship to study radio theater, and it was all just a pretense to try to get to meet Douglas Adams. So I went over to England. I lived there for a year, and while I was there, I picked up the phone book of London, and I looked in it, and I looked for Douglas Adams, and I found his address, and it said Sirius Productions, like Sirius the Dog Star. So I just went there. I called him, and he didn't answer. Nobody answered. So I went there, and I rang the bell, and this voice came through the speaker, and I was expecting it to be a business, like I would get his secretary or something, but this male British voice came through the speaker, and he said, "Hello," and I said, "Hi, I'm here studying radio theater in London for a year. I'd like to try to interview Douglas Adams." And there was this long pause, and then this voice said, "How did you get this address?" And I said, "Well, it's in the phone book." And he went, "Ah, right." and then he said, "Would you come back next Tuesday at 11 a.m.? And I said, "Yeah, sure." So I came back, and sure enough, it was his house, and he invited me in and gave me a beer and let me talk to him for a couple hours. It was fantastic.
Oh, I didn't realize it was a couple hours. Wow.
Yeah.
Do you remember what you talked about?
Absolutely, yeah. First of all, his wife at the time was pregnant with their soon-to-be daughter. And she's the one who let me in. She said he's up at the top floor of the house, and he's being interviewed for a television program. So she said he said you're welcome to go up and sit behind the camera and listen. So I went up there, and it was this attic room, and there were all these folios on shelves of the original manuscript versions of all of his books. I was so tempted to just pull them out and start leafing through them and looking for margin notes. But then he did this whole interview on the computer, and it was back when computers were still relatively new, and he was talking about how amazing computers were. We sort of at the time saw them as glorified typewriters, and he was so excited. He was talking to the camera, and he was saying that, no, it's going to be every tool you can imagine. It's just a typewriter now, but in another 10, 20 years, it's going to replace every tool we have, which turned out to be right. And after that interview, we went downstairs, and I asked him a bunch of questions about radio theater and his writing process and all kinds of stuff like that. So he was just a very nice guy, gave me a Heineken. We sat there and chatted, and he didn't try to rush me out the door. He just kind of let me sit there until I said, "Well, I'm sure you have other things to do." And he said, "Well, yeah, if that's everything." So he was a fantastic person.
So
that's amazing.
So were you taking notes, or were you just listening, or?
Yeah, I should have recorded it, but at the time I was just barely out of college, and I felt really presumptuous as it was, so I felt intrusive if I recorded him, which would have been ridiculous. But I took notes, and I'll be doggone if I know where they are. I know I have them somewhere. I have about 14 bins of written material and notebooks in the basement. So it's in there somewhere. It's like Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark, the last scene.
That's just so amazing. Yeah, I'm just so impressed by your chutzpah to just show up at his house like that. That's really cool.
Well, I didn't know. Again, I didn't know it was his house. I figured it was his office or something. I think he was kind of amazed by my chutzpah too. He was kind of taken aback, but then he kind of rolled with it, so that was great.
Yeah, that's so cool. So,
yeah, you know, my wife Christy actually she's a huge Douglas Adams fan. Also, I mean, you know, I guess we all are to some extent or another, but she's like an even bigger fan than I was. And she was actually living in the Santa Barbara area, which is where Douglas Adams actually lived when he died. And he was speaking at some like bookstore or something. He was doing some sort of event, and she was going to go to it, and then like she just couldn't for whatever reason, and then he ended up dying like very shortly after, and so she was like kicking herself the whole time for not having gone to that.
Wow.
Yeah, little did she know that she could have just looked him up in the phone book and went to his house, and they could have
Right.
been out.
Right. Well, didn't he die too in a health club on a Stairmaster?
Yeah. He was on some kind of exercise machine and died. Yeah, he had a heart attack.
Which you would have thought that was he would have known better. I mean, if you read the whole Gulliver Friendship series where all the people are in the tracksuits and he's always making fun of exercise, and you would have thought he would have stayed away from that.
Yeah.
That was actually just shortly before my partner and I graduated from college. We graduated from New College, which has a tradition of people kind of dressing up for graduation. So my partner ended up wearing a bathrobe with a black armband to honor Douglas Adams with our graduation walk, which was kind of awesome because all of our friends understood it, and then we spent half the day explaining it to everyone else, which was really nice.
Cool.
Well, John, you just need to find a time machine, and that problem will be all solved.
Yeah, right.
Okay, and so John, so the reason we're doing this Dirk Gently panel is because you said that this show is so good. So you want to just talk a little bit about how you came to watch this show and why you like it so much?
Sure. I don't remember when I first heard about it. I mean, you know, I just heard about it through media covering it, talking about that the adaptation was coming along, and so you know, I set my TiVo to record it because I was like, hey, Douglas Adams show, I'm going to check that out. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I didn't really have any expectations. I had read the first book, and I liked it well enough. Although, I mean, I was a Hitchhiker's Guide fan. I had never read the Dirk Gently books. But Christy was a big fan, and so she insisted I read the first one, and so I did. And I liked it, but I couldn't say I remembered like a ton of it. And I never read the second one, but this show, like, I was just so impressed by it. Like, I immediately was attracted to how, like, wonderfully weird it is. It's just, like, so strange. And I thought, like, I really liked the performances and stuff, like Elijah Wood's great and everything. And, but it's one of those things where I'm like, I was consistently astounded that it managed to impress me over and over and over again throughout the course of the 8 episodes. So that's one of the things that, that I just was so enthusiastic to recommend it. And it's like, there's so many great surprises in it that I was just so pleased with it. And I mean, it's like, it's really hard to categorize because it's so weird. It's like, well, I guess it's fantasy. I mean, it's like it uses time travel, but it doesn't really seem like science fiction because it plays so fast and loose with the rules. And then, you know, I watched a little bit of season 2 and it's like, okay, well, that seems much more clearly fantasy, but who knows what's going on? So, I mean, that's what you feel like most of the time you're watching it. Like, wait, what's going on now? But I mean, I think that's appropriate for Dirk Gently.
Well, so how about Tom? You're the other person here who's read the book, I think. Do you remember it that well?
Yeah, fairly well, and I've been rereading it as well.
So tell us about your history with Dirk Gently, the book.
Well, you know, when I was a teenager, my mom bought me the Hitchhiker series, and I just devoured those over and over and over again. I think I ended up buying them like 10 times because I would wear them out and buy them again. But then when I kept wishing he would write new books, and then he wrote the first Dirk Gently book just as I was about to leave for my year in England. And I was a little disappointed as a young guy, you know, to be honest. It wasn't as zany and as fun as the Hitchhiker series, but it definitely still pulled me in, and I still liked it and read it several times. And yeah, I didn't like it quite as much, but I did like it. It did still have that feeling of somebody who's looking at the universe and saying, what in the heck is going on? And then confronting, in asking that question, confronting the answer that you can find out what's going on, but it's not going to make any sense to you. It's going to make less sense than if you never asked the question at all. But just have a good time with it. It'll be fun. That seems to be the underlying theme of his entire body of work.
Right. And so I've never read the novel, but I did listen to the radio drama. And there's a lot of stuff going on in that radio drama. There's time travel and ghosts and robot monks.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just this crazy melange of tropes and stuff.
Yeah, and so it seems like the show is basically either just parallel to the books or perhaps is intended to take place like after the books or something.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be.
It's clearly not an adaptation. What's that?
I think it's supposed to be after the books. That's what I heard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he makes a few references to past cases.
That's right.
That sort of riff on the books.
Yeah, I think the book, the characters at first, when I first started watching the TV show, kind of put me off because I have this impression of who Dirk Gently is in my mind, and he's probably a mid-30s, late 30s, early 40s, gruff, overweight detective who just has let go of the central idea of being a detective, which is that you gather concrete clues and you form an idea of what's going on, and he's just embraced this idea of just go with it. Just if you see somebody who looks like they know where they're going, follow them because they might lead you to a clue. And he just throws everything to the wind, and it's ridiculous, and it doesn't work out, but he's so bullheaded it eventually does. Now, that wasn't what the TV show was at all, but very quickly it seemed to me that what they did almost, and I'd love to talk to the guy who wrote this and directed it and produced it, but it almost seemed to me like they, instead of the Dirk Gently character from the books, they kept the central idea of that detective agency and the central theme of just let it go and enjoy it because you're gonna get there eventually. But for the characters, they almost pulled Ford and Arthur in, and it's almost as if the Dirk Gently character from the TV show is Ford Prefect, and the Todd Brotzman guy is Arthur Dent. Those are. I was watching it at first. I couldn't enjoy it, and then when I decided that's what was going on, then I could really enjoy it. So that just let me let go of my preconceptions and go, "Oh, this is something different." And then it wasn't exactly that as you got more into it, but it did seem to follow that kind of parallel for me.
Well, it's interesting. I don't know if any of you guys have seen the British Dirk Gently TV show, but
not yet.
It's interesting because he's a completely different character. In the radio drama, he's more like Tom, like you're describing, the kind of slightly gruff, fairly competent professional detective who's just a little bit weird. And then in the British TV show, he's this total asshole who's also kind of a con artist. And then in this new show, he's like, I would call him like a manic pixie dream boy or something. So yeah, it's just interesting how you can the character is so flexible to different interpretations. But how about Leah? What do you think about this new Dirk Gently character?
Well, I think I'm the one that hasn't read any of the books yet, which I've read.
Well, so you've got a fresh perspective.
Right. I'm coming in, like, I read the Hitchhiker series years ago, and the way that the show was marketed to me was sort of this very wacky comedy, and it looked a little bit off-putting at the beginning, and I kind of accidentally binged it over the last winter holiday. I watched the first one, only intending to watch one or two. And then I got so sucked in by the characters by the end of episode 2 that I just watched the entire show over the course of a day, because I had to know. It wasn't even so much that I had to know how the mysteries connected, even though obviously they keep hammering that home that they're going to connect eventually. But it was honestly more the relationship between Todd and Amanda, his sister, which I really loved. And I really wanted to see where they took that. And I also, just having never seen Samuel Barnett's work before, I thought he was hilarious, which I know a lot of reviews found him a little bit too frenetic, I guess, like hectic in his portrayal, but I was completely taken with it.
It's interesting because my initial reaction to the show was I thought it might be a little too weird and wacky for me. It took me maybe 3 or 4 episodes before I was totally on board, where I was like, oh, okay, wait, I figured out enough of this that this is not too, I know that this is not going to be too wacky for me. This is just an appropriate level of wacky. It sounds like, John, you agree with that?
Yeah, pretty much. And it was interesting because I was watching it with Christy, who, as I said, really, really loves those books. Around that point, I think we watched the first 3, and then we started watching the 4th one, and she kind of was like, yeah, I'm not really into watching this right now. And then it took us a while to finish it, to go back to it, because, I don't know, she wasn't in the mood to watch it. And I think she was having some of those issues, about that, but then also, the sort of what Tom was talking about, where it's it was different enough from the books, or different enough from the idea of what you would expect Dirk Gently to be, that she was having trouble wrapping her mind around it, or really getting into it. Whereas I didn't have any of those issues, because I only I read the book, but I didn't really remember it super well. It wasn't an important book to me in the way that it was important to her. I actually watched the first 3 when they first aired, but then I didn't actually catch up on it until just recently, when I emailed you to say, hey, we should really do this panel. And so I actually ended up rewatching those first 3 again when we finally got back to it. And so, I think I enjoyed it even more the second time. So yeah, I really love it.
I'm sorry to interrupt, John. I had a question. Did you rewatch them because now you knew what the plot was and you wanted to go back and see how things looked with that knowledge?
No, not really. I mean, it was more because we had watched the first 3 so long ago that I felt like if we were going to really give the show a fair shake, we needed to start over from the beginning. And since it was only 3 episodes, it's let's just rewatch the first 3, and then we'll jump in back. Then we'll get back to where we were at, after we catch up. And since Christy had sort of not fully embraced it, I wanted her to have a chance to watch those first 3 again, to get on board before we get to the point where she stopped the first time.
I mean, Tom, you were forced to binge this show to be ready for this panel, right? So, what was your experience like watching the show? You didn't have time probably to to have any doubts or anything, right? Because you were watching 3 episodes a day or something.
Yeah, it was a hectic week. I had all this work, a crazy week, lots of work backed up, and you contacted me and said, would you like to be on this panel? And I was like, of course, I would love to be on the panel. And then you said, can you watch the entire season? And I went, oh my gosh. So I was watching an episode with breakfast, an episode with lunch, and an episode after my kids were in bed, after dinner. So it was a little hectic, but, I had finished watching all of Voltron, which a new season came out, which that's a fantastic show. And, the new Netflix original of Voltron. And I was looking for something else to watch, and I would have rather just watched this, 15 minutes here or there over the next month and a half. But having to binge watch it, I got so into it. I agree 100% with John that I started to watch it, and at first I was like, I'm not really sure about this. And then the plot and most of all, like Leah said, the characters just grabbed me, and the relationships between the characters. It's like they looked at those books and they said, these are really cool concepts, and every character that we add, we're going to add a character that if Adams had thought of it, if Douglas Adams saw it, he would have thought, oh, I wish I had thought of that, because I would have put it in. They're so fantastic, and they fit so well. I mean, where they refer to her at one point, Dirk Gently refers to her as a homicidal dirt muppet. But,
yes,
the Bart, the Fiona Dorff character, she was just mystifying and fascinating. She's like a train wreck. You just couldn't look away from her. And fascinating that she's a holistic assassin to counterbalance the holistic detective. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. And every time she was on the screen, I was just like, I don't think I breathed the whole time. So that was fantastic. And then, just as it got toward the middle, I think because I was real tired, I've only been sleeping like 5 hours a night this week. I was real tired, and I'd watch another episode, and I was thinking, oh, they're starting to kind of lose me a little bit here. I think there was like one episode somewhere in the middle where I started to feel that way. And then, boom, like you said, there's spoilers. The guy shows up in the armor with all the weapons and stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, what is happening now? They just kept, like you said, they just kept impressing you and kept, every time you thought you kind of were on solid ground, they'd pull the rug out again. And, you'd fall in a big vat of Jell-O and be like, wee, this is fun. So
when the guy shows up in the steampunk armor there, that was like a totally jaw-dropping moment for me. I was like, oh my god, like this show is so awesome. Like I can't even believe it. It's like one of those things where like I'm almost sorry we have to talk about it on the show because I was like I want people to be able to watch it and not know that's coming, but it's like, oh god, it's so cool.
Right.
Well, speaking of the holistic assassin, though, the one question I'm still confused about is why did she think she had to kill Dirk gently? Maybe I just missed that, but was there like an explanation for that?
I think the idea is just that in the same way that Dirk will occasionally get a hunch about where he's supposed to go, my assumption is that his name just sort of popped into her head. Because there is a little bit of that, I don't want to spoil anything in the second season, but there seems to be a little bit of that happening so far in the second season, where people seem to know his name, but they don't know what it means. Mm-hmm. So they just know that they're supposed to find Dirk Gently, but they don't know what a Dirk Gently even is. They don't even know he's a person. So I was kind of taking it as that she just woke up with this name in her head and then like went off on her quest. And she's probably my favorite character.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to agree that I think Douglas Adams would have really been disappointed that he's not the one that came up with the holistic assassin idea, because like I mean, yeah, it's just so perfect. It's like I would watch a whole show just about her.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with Leah too that I think she has no concept of what she's doing except that she's supposed to kill whoever is presented to her. So she has it's like the universe went, well, we're not going to give her a processor to sift through this stuff. We're just going to give her a name and she'll go at it and kill it. And if she's not supposed to kill it, we won't let her. So I think that's why she tries to kill Dirk, is because the universe just plants this name as like the number one thing in her head. And so she's like, oh, okay, I kill everything that the universe puts in front of me, so I'm supposed to kill him. And she's mistaken, but it's okay because the universe doesn't let her. And then she realizes like, oh, he must not be one of the people I kill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So does anyone want to hazard to describe the plot of this TV show?
Oh, I can try.
Actually, Leah, you had a pretty good one in your article. I don't know if you could reproduce it.
Let's see if I can remember it. Okay, so in the 1800s, a man attempts to create a time machine and ends up inadvertently sending the time machine itself through time, and then he's able to send himself through time. How am I doing so far?
Okay, that's a good start. Yeah. Somehow this machine, you can use it as a time machine, a free energy machine, and as a machine to swap people's minds to different bodies machine.
Right, which he does not know. The second two are not his intention, if I'm remembering correctly.
Right.
Yes. So it ends up like in the 70s, right, with this sort of cult that's living in his house, and they start swapping bodies with celebrities so that they can all become rich and famous and kind of like move through time, swapping bodies back and forth.
Yeah, it's sort of a kind of duct tape together immortality scheme, because they can just keep swapping and swapping and swapping and not have to die.
Yeah, it's kind of like being John Malkovich if there were lots of people you could jump into.
Yeah.
And I really like that idea of swapping bodies, of this sort of cult of immortals, who live forever by swapping bodies. What did you guys think of that guy? That he was like Chief Tyrrell from Battlestar Galactica?
Yeah.
So John, did you like that character?
Yeah, I thought he did a really good job with that role. Like, I didn't even recognize him at first. He had like so disappeared into the role, and then I was like, oh wait, that's the guy from Battlestar Galactica. But yeah, I like the idea that he was like, he was this famous like musician, for a long time, and then now he's just this schlub who's clinging to this like lost life of his now. Yeah, I don't know. The whole thing is just so weird. It's like, I mean, it's all like the performance, I think, of him acting so weird and being in such a weird situation where it's like, he's already transferred Lydia Spring into the dog, and so he's got the dog, but he's also got Lydia Spring there, like as the dog. And yeah, there's just so many questions happening in the show, and you just don't know what's going on for so long. It's like so much fun just waiting to figure out what's going on.
Well, it's just the moment, my favorite moment with that character that I found kind of poignant is that he's talking to the rock star's wife or number one groupie or whatever she was.
Yeah.
And he says, like, you know, I jumped into his body after the second album or something. He's like, you never even knew the real guy. That was me the whole time. You never even met him.
Right.
Yeah, that was cool. I also really liked, I thought it was a really defining moment when he's talking to the bald guys who are all really weird. And he's telling them, you know, they're kind of turning against him, and he's trying to give this speech to kind of turn them back to his side. And he says, look, you know, you shouldn't have had to go through what you went through. You know, some of you guys, most of you guys were, your minds and your souls were stored in birds or rats or dogs for years. And it affected your minds. You know, when we pulled you back out, you weren't the same. Something was wrong with you. So I suddenly realized, well, that's what's going on with him. He was this hip rock star, and he got transferred into this nebbish, and he sort of has become this weird. He's become the body. The body has affected his mind so much that he's become this weird kind of bizarre character.
Yeah. Well, there was just a moment, I forget which, it was like one of the early episodes, maybe the third episode or second episode or something, but where Dirk gently picks up the corgi, and he's kind of like holding it in front of his face. He says, "Are you Lydia Spring?" And I was like, "Oh, of course. Oh man, how did I not see that?" You know. But yeah, but it throws like 18 mysteries at you in the first episode, and so you know.
Exactly. Like that's one of the strengths I think is just that the time travel plot that we just sort of hashed out is a tiny fraction of the entire show. Because there's so much more going on around the time travel that is sort of the plot through line. But then there's 4 other plots.
Yeah. Well, and like the first big mystery that you basically encounter on the show is, so Todd Brotzman is he's like a bellhop at this hotel, and he stumbles upon this like murder scene in the penthouse, and it's like, it seems like a shark has taken a bite out of part of the room, but it's up on the ceiling, and it's like, well, how would a shark get in there at all, let alone at the ceiling, you know? And but then it all makes sense somehow. It's like it's a scene that should make no sense. And
but even before that,
explain it.
Even before that, John, he's going up the elevator and he sees himself wearing the fur coat or whatever, run around the corner.
Yeah. So
you know,
and it all comes together.
Yeah, so you know that there must be time travel involved, just from the start, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which is, it's such a great way to seed it. And then the way that they bring it back and they actually give it a real emotional kick when he sees the scene from the other side, when he sees it from then his present, looking back at himself.
Yeah, actually, the more we talk about it, the more I kind of wish that I did have time to go back and rewatch the whole series, the whole first season after I had seen it, to, like, as Tom was saying, to sort of like look back now that you know everything and see if, you know, how it adds up as you're watching it through the first time. Cause I didn't have time to revisit it once I'd seen the whole show. But yeah, it feels like the sort of show that would reward that.
Yeah, I'm probably going to do that, and not just because I want to see how the plot hangs together, but because it's the highest compliment I can ever pay any show or book or anything, that any work of fiction, is that I wanna experience it again, and I would give that to this one all the way. I mean, it's not just that it's a cool plot; it's that it's so fun all the way through, and I'll probably end up checking it out one more time.
Well, see, and John, so you mentioned Elijah Wood's character, Todd Brotzman, who is a bellhop, and he has this fairly convoluted backstory where there was this disease, this genetic disease that runs in his family that he had pretended to have so that his parents would just keep giving him money so he could have his band and not have to work and stuff. But then his sister actually did come down with this disease, which I don't remember what it was called, but it's this disease.
Pararibulitis.
Pararibulitis, where you basically have hallucinations that are full sensory hallucinations, where you imagine your hands are on fire or whatever, things like that. And so, but by that point, his parents had already used up all their money on him. And so now he's kind of trying to take care of his sister, having exhausted all the family's resources, but he's never come clean that any of this stuff happens. He's pretended that he's cured, and his sister, the only thing that keeps her going is the example that he managed to beat this thing. Actually, Tom, you were a bellhop for a while, right? What did you think of the Give us some bellhop expert analysis of the show.
Bellhop's view of the story.
Yeah.
I thought they did a fantastic job because that's almost how I felt every night, bellhopping, just overworked and with somebody above you telling you, like, go do this bizarre, like, inexplicable thing, and you're like, okay. And then you go do it, and you just see all these insane things happening around you, and it's all happening so fast, and you don't really have time to deal with any of it. And I thought that fit very well. Especially the part when he said he lost his master key. I thought, oh man, that's like something bad's going to happen there. You lose your master key and you're in trouble. Somebody's going to use it for something evil.
So what was the weirdest scene you ever like opened the door onto while you were working as a bellhop?
I wouldn't say open the door onto. It was more like you go into these people's rooms and just bizarre things happen. There was one guy who we used to wonder about because he would show up and he would show up at the hotel, an expensive hotel, in a really tiny, inexpensive car, and he would climb out of this tiny car, and he was like 6'8", and he looked exactly like Saddam Hussein. And he talked in this very thick Middle Eastern accent, and I would always try to engage him in conversation. And his wife was about 4'5", and I would always try to engage them in conversation, and they were always shouting at each other. And at one point, he would never answer my call, he'd never talk to me or anything. And at one point, I asked him, I said, "Where are you from?" And he said, "It does not matter." So that was basically the only question he ever answered for me. But there were some other things that were kind of risque that happened with people instructing me to do things that I probably wouldn't want to repeat on this radio show. But
yeah, it's like the bellhop confidentiality agreement or whatever, right? Bellhop privilege.
I don't think the people themselves would mind. I think you would mind if I repeated what they said.
I see. Well, you mentioned that this guy had a little car, which makes me think of how Dirk Gently has like amazing cars. Do we ever get any idea how he gets his cars?
I assumed he just kind of steals them, right? But I mean, like in a non-nefarious way somehow. I don't know. It just he stumbles upon them.
That was my impression.
Like he does everything.
Yeah.
That's funny
and then
because
they just sort of wave it away. So
that's funny because in the British Dirk Gently, he's still driving the same car he had in college, and it's this like really like beat up car that like hardly ever starts and stuff. So I thought it was funny that now he's got the awesome sports cars.
Yeah, I actually just read that segment last night in the book. He says he has a Jaguar that was produced at the time in the company's history when you had to pull them in for servicing more often than you had to give them gas. So he has this whole debate within his head of, am I going to go get the car and drive there, or am I just going to walk 5 miles? And he's like, well, the car's never going to work anyway. And get in the thing, and it's going to be this big basically struggle to get the car moving. So I might as well just walk, and I'll get there late, and people will die. But it's better than trying to drive the car.
It's interesting because, in the radio drama, you get this bit of Dirk Gently's backstory where he had gotten kicked out of college because he was selling exam things that would allow you to cheat on the exams that he thought were fake, but because he's psychic, they turned out to be real.
That's right.
And then when he gets caught, he gets kicked out of college. So I don't think that was in this show, but I like that background detail.
Yeah.
Yeah, not that they've mentioned yet. The only backstory that we've gotten is his time being experimented upon by Blackwing, the nefarious secret U.S. organization. So yeah, I don't even know if they've said whether or not he's had any sort of secondary education or if he just escaped Blackwing at a certain point.
Mm-hmm.
Blackwing, that's not from either of the books, Tom, right? They just made that up for this show?
Yeah, they made it up for the show, and I wasn't really crazy about when they brought that in. I just kind of felt like it was it's just a trope that's been used a lot. I think the first time I ever saw it was in Firestarter, and then it seems like there was that TV show about House of Dolls or something, the one by now I've dropped the guy's name, but the guy who made
Dollhouse by Joss Whedon.
Oh, Dollhouse.
That's the one. That's the one. Joss Whedon, or it seems like that pops up in so many different anything where there's like somebody has powers, it's like, oh, well, they were experimented on by the U.S. government. It just gets kind of tired.
Yeah, I was going to say, speaking of Blackwing, it didn't really occur to me until I actually watched the first 2 episodes of the second season. But that one guy, that stupid guy that is part of Blackwing, he's like the partner in the first season. If anybody's seen The Good Place, he acts exactly like Jason/John Yu, like that guy. His acting style is exactly like the same. It's like they went to the same school of acting stupid, and their performance is exactly the same. It's so weird. Once I made that connection, I'm like, oh my god, how did I not see it before? But that's actually another show that we should totally do a panel on because it's amazing.
That is an extraordinary show, and only getting better.
Is that actor related to Nicolas Cage? Because I know he's not, but he looked a lot like him when he was being crazy too.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. There must be some other characters we need to talk about here. So how about
how about the Rowdy 3?
Yeah. Okay, so John, tell us about the Rowdy 3.
Yeah, so the Rowdy 3 it's actually 4 people, I think, but they're called the Rowdy 3, and they drive around this beat up van, and it's got like a 3 on it, and they sort of vandalize Todd's apartment at some point and are scary, and like they, smash up his stuff with the baseball bats and all this kind of stuff. And there's sort of mysterious figure that's in the show for a while, and then eventually they sort of they end up following around his sister. And before long, we discover that they can actually like suck some energy out of her, and it helps like relieve her attacks of the pararibulitis.
Just when she has the attacks.
Yeah. And so it's like they sort of become like they sort of form this symbiotic relationship, and it's kind of weird and sweet in a strange sort of way. Like even though there are these crazy, like scary looking guys, driving around this beat up van. It turns out it's like, oh, they're actually cool and they're actually helping her now. And, I don't know, it's weird, but it's fun.
Why are they smashing everything up? Was there an explanation for that?
I don't think so.
I think they're just like that.
Why wouldn't you? I mean, if you could just get away with smashing up whatever you want, wouldn't you? Maybe not.
I was wondering if it was related to their like energy vampiric powers somehow or something, but I guess maybe nobody noticed anything like that. Tom, were you going to say something about the Rowdy 3?
Oh, just that I love them, and I love that symbiotic relationship because it did start out where they were very menacing, and they weren't just scary looking. They were beating the crap out of anybody they came in contact with, and you got the feeling that they were really evil. But then, it turns out that they're these weird energy vampires also experimented on by Blackwing called Project Incubus because they're incubi and they're vampires, but they're energy vampires. And they suck that energy. When she gets this bad energy that gives her all this pain, they come up and feed on it, and they love it. And there's this cool sequence before you find that out about them where they're following her, and you're terrified for her. And she's alone, and her brother's not there, and you think they're gonna kill her. And she ventures out of her house, which is something she's been terrified to do for a long time. And she's walking down the middle of the road, and you see the van, like, off in the distance behind her, following her, and she's talking on the phone, and you think, oh my gosh, it's going to run her down, or something horrible is going to happen. And she turns around and sees the van, and then she smiles and she nods like it makes her feel good that they're there. And then you realize, oh, these guys aren't a menacing presence to her at all. And then that whole other plot develops where they help her.
Yeah, it's a fantastic inversion, too, because at the beginning, she is so helpless because of her illness, and she's so dependent on Todd, and it's just such a wonderful thing to watch her become much more aggressive and assertive. And then she's the one that sort of chooses to have a relationship with these 4 crazy guys. And like the scene when she ends up getting into the van with them to leave, and they say something about, weren't you scared to get in a van full of crazy people? And she says something like, you think this is the first time I've been in a van full of crazy people? And it's just such a great moment of seeing her as sort of this punk rock girl that is finally going back to being what she wanted to be before the disease kind of, derailed her life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then she adds, she says, weren't you scared to have a crazy person get into your van?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
great.
Well, Leah, in your article, you talked a lot about the relationship between Todd and Amanda. Is it Amanda, the sister?
Amanda,
Yeah.
Yeah. Could you just talk about a little bit about what you were saying in your article?
Oh, well, I thought it was, well, first, at the beginning of the show, I thought it was really interesting to see such a close sibling relationship, because I feel like that isn't something that shows up on TV all that often. Although, there's actually another one happening on the Tick right now as well on Amazon that it's sort of the same thing, where it's a brother and sister who support each other as adults. In a way, seemingly that their parents can't anymore, either because they can't financially help or they're just sort of not emotionally present enough. So I thought that was a really interesting tack to take with Todd and Amanda, since they're both added, they're original to the show. They're not in the books at all. That the showrunners chose to write them as this close sibling relationship. And then to see how it changed, where you learn how much Todd has been lying to her, but then also trying to help her over the course of their lives. And just the extent that when she finds out that he's been lying to her for years, it just sort of destroys her whole world. And the fact that the show allowed it to be as devastating as it was, and the fact that they spent a lot of time dealing with the fallout of it, and that basically when she kicks him out of her life, it's a real moment when she tells him that she's leaving with the Rowdy Three and she's not going to stay around and she doesn't need Todd to take care of her anymore. It's just a very raw moment. More so than I think I've seen. I mean, especially in something that was sort of marketed as a wacky comedy. It was just extremely deep, I thought, which I like, because I think it's rare to see real adults on TV at this point, I think. So seeing the two of them as these sort of people who have tried to create lives for themselves that haven't quite worked out, and now they're getting to an age where they're trying to figure out what they can do next, and they both feel kind of stuck. And then Dirk kind of comes into their lives and disrupts everything. It's just interesting to watch them react to that, and then to see how it actually has repercussions through their past as well as their present.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I was going to say, John, you have a sister, right? What did you think of this brother-sister relationship?
Yeah, no, I thought it was really interesting. I mean, I don't have that type of relationship with my sister where, having the support or anything like that. Although she's also older than me, whereas Todd's older than Amanda. But yeah, I mean, it seemed pretty valid to me. Like, it was an interesting exploration of that kind of relationship. And yeah, I agree with Leah that, you don't often see that kind of thing on television or anything. Although I actually, it's interesting. So I'm in San Antonio right now at my niece's house, my sister's daughter. And, I'm going to be going to the World Fantasy Convention next weekend with my sister. And so it's like, I can't say that there's any particular parallel between me and her and Todd and Amanda, but, I'm bringing her into my world, into the, fantasy world, now for the first time. It's her first convention. So, hopefully I won't have to, save her from any, crazy people in bands or anything like that.
I mean, the one other thing maybe that I didn't quite believe was, you mentioned that Elijah Wood's a really good actor, and he is, but like all the crap that this Todd Holtzman character has done, I didn't quite believe that Elijah Wood would have done all that crap. There's just something kind of nice, just sort of intrinsically nice about him that I didn't quite believe that he would have like ripped off all the, stolen his bandmates' instruments and sold them and stuff like that. I don't know.
Have you seen Wilfred?
I have not seen Wilfred.
Oh, well, I mean, that's another Elijah Wood show, and that might refine your opinion of what Elijah Wood's capable of. I don't know.
Or Sin City.
Maybe you'd have the same problems, but.
Did you see Sin City?
I did see Sin City, yeah. I liked him, but he doesn't really talk in that, from what I remember.
No, but he's terrifying.
I think I've just watched Lord of the Rings like 25 times or something. It's just always be Frodo to me.
Yeah, that does sort of color all the rest of the career, obviously. So.
Dave, can I a bellhop, a crazy bellhop story just popped into my head. I don't know if it's too late.
No, go for it.
Okay, so I was in the Godsmack came to the hotel, and there was this big to-do, and we had lots of security in the form of about 7 sheriff's deputies, and this great big, taller than me, I'm 6'3", taller than me guy, a lot broader than me, was drunk and disorderly, and these 7 sheriff's deputies were surrounding him, and it was January, it was about 10 below, and they gave him the option to leave the hotel or he would be arrested. And he said, I'm at this concert. He goes, I'm at this concert. I'm wasted. He goes, I can't leave right now. If I get in my car and drive out of here, you guys are gonna take me for driving under the influence. So they said they get closer and closer to him, and they're looking at each other, and they got like buzz cuts, and they're all like big guys, and they're all kind of looking at each other like we're gonna take this guy down. And I just didn't like it because there were so many of them. So I offered to give him a ride out of there. I gave him a ride, him and his girlfriend, a ride out of there. And he, on the way home, he said, "You gotta be kidding me! You gotta be kidding me!" He goes, "What do you need? What do you need? Pull your car over. I'm gonna fill it up with gas." So we did that, and then he gave me a $50 bill. And when I dropped him and his girlfriend off, he said, "Listen," he goes, "I'm from Southie. I'm connected. You ever need anything? You need coke. You need hookers. You need somebody whacked. You save this number." So I saved his number for about 20 years, and then I lost it. You never know.
Oh, man.
What you gonna...
You could. It would be just great if you would read that out on the podcast.
Yeah.
In case any of our listeners need anybody whacked.
Yeah, we'd all be connected then.
I think I might get whacked if I did that.
No, that's a really cool story. Yes, I mean that's the kind of crazy stuff that happens when you're a bellhop, I guess.
That's right.
Well, speaking of the everything's connected stuff, you know, I one of my favorite things that incidentally happened related to the show is so when I emailed Dave to say that we should do this panel, for some reason he got my last email about it 3 times, and I'm like, oh my God, Dave, don't you see everything's connected? 3 questions, 1 answer, and which is like a thing from the show, and so it was just kind of funny that, you know, mysteriously he got 3 copies of that email. So
yeah,
love it.
Well, so this show's good, right? We all agree.
Oh yeah.
Does anyone have any like major complaints about the show?
Not me.
yeah,
I don't think so. I mean, I just yeah, I mean, at least opening into the 2nd season, it's going in a really interesting new direction, which I really like. I think the only quibble that I would have, and it's not much of one, it's just that it's sort of a slow burn show. It is something that you do sort of have to watch it. Like you were saying, like the closer together you can watch everything, and the more you can binge it, basically, the better it is. Or if you have time to rewatch, because it is so dense and so tightly packed with stuff that it can be a little difficult for somebody to just sort of dip into it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, like Tom, you were saying that you would have rather watched it over a month and a half or something, right? Do you not think you might have trouble keeping the plot straight if you went that long between episodes?
Absolutely. I didn't mean for the quality of my watching experience. I just meant because of how busy I am.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'll piggyback on what Leah was saying about the season 2 a little bit. Just, you know, without going into too much detail, I'm a little less sure about season 2 so far. I mean, there's only 2 episodes that have aired so far, and I mean, I'm still into it, and it's like, but I'm much more unsure about what the heck is going on, and I'm getting like a little tiny bit impatient to find out like what's happening. But I have so much love for the show from season 1 that I'm willing to give them a lot of rope. So, and by the end of episode 2, it's like things are sort of getting in motion, more, and so I'm more looking forward to what's coming next. I mean, it does one of those things that shows do sometimes where like in between seasons, they make this big change, and go in like this different direction, or else they make a major thing happen between the seasons or whatever. And so like, you know, sort of you have to regain your footing at the start of the season, and sort of takes you a bit to sort of catch up to where they want you to be. And I don't always love it when shows do that, but, you know, like I said, I'm willing to go with it wherever they take me, but, There's such strange things that happen in those first 2 episodes that I'm like, well, I don't know, man. Let's see where they go. You know?
Yeah, I was wondering about that, where they were going to go, because the end of this season was so satisfying, and there's this fantastic image just popped into my head of when Fiona Dourif's character is confronted by like the whole U.S. Army, and she's got a rock, but she looks so confident. She's like, "I've got a rock."
It's such a good note to end on. But so far, I'm just, the thing that and again, I don't want to say too much about season 2 because I don't want to spoil it too much, but I'm just really intrigued by the upping of the fantasy quotient. Basically, the extent to which they've introduced a fantasy element that was not present in the first one. It's a very different feel, already. And I'm just really hoping that they can pull off tying all of it together as well as they did, throughout the first season. Because this does feel like this even more so feels like it's a couple different shows that are kind of being slowly tied together. That I'm hopeful. So far, I'm also, again, to go back to the characters, I'm just enjoying spending time with the characters again. Because I found that I missed them, which is a really good.
Yeah. Yeah, we should also give some love to Farah and Ken, who are also great characters that we haven't discussed yet. Ken being the helper of the holistic assassin, unwittingly, and then Farah being like a more useful detective than Dirk Gently, who actually knows how to detect things, but was hired by Patrick Spring, the guy who built the time machine and everything, to find out what happened to his daughter or whatever. She was basically his head of security. But they're both really great, and again, both continue on into the second season. So, but they're definitely both great characters.
Yeah, and they're both. Well, again, the show really enjoys setting up certain tropes and then sort of subverting them. Where Ken starts out as sort of this, you think he's kind of a hacker that's working for bad guys, and then the more that you get to know him, he's this extremely sweet, just incredibly kind person who's actually able to really befriend Bart, which no one has done that in her life. And then in Farah's case, she is, when you first see Farah, she's actually being held hostage. And then you watch as she becomes more and more competent and capable. And she's really, she, more than all the rest of them, I think she's the reason that things kind of go well over the course of season 1. But then also is honestly also very neurotic. And it's a really good balance that she strikes, the actress, Jade Eschet, she strikes a really good balance between a very realistic portrayal of anxiety issues and also being sort of this extremely tough, competent person. It's a fantastic character.
Yeah, I loved that. You reminded me of that whole scene, the series of scenes in the beginning where she's being held hostage, and I absolutely loved that. Like, they would just cut to her for like a few seconds, and you'd see her, and you'd think, "Oh my gosh, what's going on with this woman?" And then they'd cut away, but something would always happen every time they showed her. Something shocking would always happen. Like at one point, some guy's looks like he's about to kill her, and then this random bullet from this thing that's going on with the other characters comes up through the floor and kills the guy, but she's still stuck tied to the chain to the bed, and then in another scene she's almost free, and then she knocks herself out, and there's like a series of scenes like that where you just get a few seconds of hooray, and then oh no with her.
Mm-hmm.
It's so well woven into the rest of it too, because it is just these brief flashes of this other story that's going on that the rest of the characters don't even know about.
Yeah.
There are also these 2 police detective characters we haven't mentioned yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were great.
They will not be returning for season 2, spoiler.
Spoiler.
Alas, no.
No, I actually found that very, like Leah was saying, that this show pitches itself as sort of a wacky comedy, and then it has it's surprisingly dark and surprisingly emotionally affecting. Mm-hmm. And definitely the fate of that second police detective.
Yeah.
I found very, I was like, oh no.
Yeah, that second one was brutal, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's also the show is extremely violent. Like, I mean, if the holistic assassin, the description of that person didn't clue you into that, it is worth a warning. I was actually thinking of suggesting that that I rewatched some of season 1 with my niece here, but she has a small child, and I was like, well, nah, like, cause it's like my niece and her husband are fans of Doctor Who, and I'm like, oh, I think people who like Doctor Who would probably like this show. Not that it's similar, but there's a sort of a sensibility about it that I think would cross over. But then I was like, well, but the child, she's not going to be able to stick around for this. We'd have to watch it after she went to bed because it's so violent.
Yeah, which is also, I mean, that is, again, an interesting choice that they made, that they made it so, and I agree with you that it feels very Who-ish while you're watching it. It is sort of that sort of spirit of Doctor Who. But then, yeah, out of nowhere, there will be some really brutal violence. So,
Well, and we should maybe mention, which I don't think we have, that this is a BBC America production. So
Right.
It has like kind of a British sensibility to it. I guess, Leah, you were saying that a lot of people were comparing it to Sherlock and stuff like that.
When it first came out, a lot of the reviews were fairly negative that I was reading before, that I think people had only watched the first couple of episodes. So they sort of found the franticness a little off-putting, just the amount of stuff that was being thrown at them. And yeah, a lot of people were comparing Dirk particularly and Samuel Barnett's performance to Benedict Cumberbatch's Sherlock, which could not be more different, I don't think.
Weird, yeah.
And he actually said, Samuel Barnett in an interview with Entertainment Weekly said that Sherlock has his mind palace, but I have my neuroses cottage, which I really loved. Because it's such a perfect way to sum him up. But he is so much warmer. But also, I mean, he does have that same sort of desire for friendship with people and the complete inability to gain friendships. But he is also a much warmer character. And also, I mean, he's relying on the universe to throw clues at him rather than sort of deducting with his massive brain the way Sherlock does.
Did those reviews turn around over the course of the season? I didn't get a chance to look at really the reviews. Has this show been successful? Do you guys know? I guess it got a second season, so it must have been fairly successful.
It got renewed. I think on Rotten Tomatoes has a higher overall grade for it. And I do think there were a few people who wrote about it later on. I think AV Club and a few others that sort of checked in later, liked the later episodes more. But I'm just remembering, I think Variety and a few other places that put out initial reviews were pretty negative, which still, it kind of surprises me because it's sort of like, they say everything is connected right there in the tagline. Like, you kind of have to keep watching. So.
Well, I mean, a couple of different people at Tor.com wrote about this show, right? Did you talk to the other people?
Oh, yeah. Well, Emily Asher Perrin, who is another staff writer at Tor.com, she actually covered their New York Comic Con panel before the show premiered. And they showed at least some of the pilot, and she really enjoyed the pilot. She's really liked it. I don't think she's been watching the second season yet, but she I think has also read a bit more Adams than I have. So I think she also had that same disconnect at the beginning of him being the Dirk character being so different from the book's character. But, she also just loves that sort of kind of British whimsy. So
I heard there was a panel they did somewhere where they all had corgis on their laps during the panel.
That was New York Comic Con.
Yeah.
Which I did not get to go to the panel, but I did meet the corgis, which was amazing, completely by accident, that I walked into the Javits Center, which is where the New York Comic Con is held. And I walked into the front doors, and the corgis from the panel were up front waiting to be picked up by their car with their handler, who was amazing and was letting people pet them as long as they were okay with it. And since they're corgis, they were completely okay with it. They were so excited to be getting the attention that they were getting. It was really probably the most adorable thing I have ever seen at a Comic-Con.
Yeah, so we should say, speaking of BBC America and the fact that there's season 2 airing now, if anybody is planning to watch season 2 and you haven't yet, or if you're going to go watch season 1, it's on Hulu. And so you could watch all of season 1, but then season 2, if you're ready to start it, and you've already missed the first 2, it's on BBC America's website. You can stream the first 2 episodes.
Cool.
Oh, excellent.
Is that with ads or without ads?
I think there was no ads. Oh, no, there are ads, and it's super annoying. Yeah, never mind.
Dave, that question just reminded me of a thing you said to me years ago that I've repeated over and over and over again, which is that television, you said, I don't watch much TV because television is kind of like a very entertaining friend who every 15 minutes stops entertaining you to ask you self-esteem lowering questions like, are you gaining weight? Are you losing your hair? Do you have really bad acne? And that I thought of that when I was watching this show because I thought we've come a long way. I can binge watch this on Amazon and I don't have to deal with that part of it. It's just a really entertaining friend now.
I got it off of iTunes. I don't know.
Same. I did. Yeah, I ended up getting the entire season, like I said, by accident.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, the BBC America video app is actually kind of great, but then when the commercials come on, it's terrible because it cuts to commercial, but then it plays the audio of like 2 seconds of the first scene after the commercial, but then it goes to commercial. And then when it actually goes to the scene after the first scene of after the commercial break, it doesn't replay that clip that you saw at the start of the commercial. So it's like it interrupts the scene a little bit, and it's like very unpleasant. I mean, although that may have just been because I'm in a place that has really slow internet, which I am.
Have you seen, John, any of our friends talking about this show or anything, or like just anyone on Twitter or anything like that?
I haven't seen too much. I mean, it seems like it flew largely under the radar, which is one of the reasons why I was really, advocating for us to do a panel, because I'm like, well, okay, it got renewed, that's good, but we should totally do a panel on this to make sure that enough people watch this. And likewise,
yeah, because if we cover it, that's going to guarantee that season 3.
Yeah, absolutely. But and I'd also urged one of our Lightspeed reviewers to review it. So Joseph Allen Hill reviewed it for Lightspeed. I don't know, it was a couple months ago.
What did he say in his review?
I mean, he really liked it. I mean, you can go see it. It's online. You can go see it. I don't remember any of the specific phrases that he used or anything, but I mean, he was generally very positive about it. Which he better be, Yeah, it's always kind of an awkward situation where it's like, I give my reviewers autonomy, but then if I ask them to review something and they don't like it, it's like, well, I don't really want to shit on this thing. I asked you to review it because I thought we all liked it. I thought we all would like it, but that hasn't happened yet. Although Carrie Vaughn, for some reason, is reviewing Geostorm for Lightspeed. I'm like, all right. I guess that didn't really need to be reviewed, but if you want to, okay.
Yeah, that one sounds like a cinematic masterpiece.
Yeah.
To watch it.
From what I've heard, sorry, this cat just jumped in my lap. Hopefully it won't make any noise.
Hopefully it's not a shark in disguise.
Yeah, so Tom, I was wondering, so with the books, is it a thing that Dirk needs like this assistant like that? Or is that something the show added?
Yeah, which I actually kind of liked. It's not till I think it's the second book this guy Richard shows up and becomes kind of Dirk's unwilling assistant. He doesn't want to be there, and I haven't read that second book in a long time, so I don't remember exactly how that happens. But yeah, he does have a kind of assistant who's kind of Arthur Dent-like. I remember liking that when he showed up and thinking, "Oh, look, it's Arthur Dent again."
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he does need that. So that was kind of a trope from the book.
I think that because I just listened to the radio drama, and that guy is in the radio drama for the first book, Richard McDuff.
Right.
And
well, maybe he is in the first book then.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I would imagine so. But I would really strongly recommend people watch the British TV show too. I think I watched 2 episodes of it. I think there are only 4 from at least that are on iTunes. But they're like less. Well, they're different than this because they're a lot funnier, I think. And every episode is its own case. And it's much lower budget, and and it's set in the UK. But there's like a really funny dynamic between Dirk Gently and this guy Richard McDuff, because Dirk Gently is just like shitting on him all the time, and he's kind of this like stoic guy, and just I don't know, the dynamic between the two of them is really funny. But so, for example, I'm going to spoil one scene from the first episode, but just to give you an incentive to watch it. But so Dirk Gently needs to break into a psychiatrist's office to steal a file on somebody he's investigating. And the psychiatrist's office is on like the 12th floor of this building or something. And so he says to this guy, lie in the grass here and kind of pose like this. And the guy's like, I'm not lying in the grass. He said, this is the McDuff guy. And he says, do it, and they have they're always arguing. So they have an argument. Finally, he's like, oh, this is all right. It gets down in the grass and sort of contorts his body. And then Dirk Gently goes up to the 12th floor and walks into the psychiatrist's office and pretends to jump off the balcony. And so the psychiatrist jumps up and runs out onto the balcony, looks down and sees the guy lying in the grass all the way down. He's like, oh my God. And they call ambulance and stuff. And then Dirk Gently just pulls the file. He pulls the file out, sits down and starts eating the guy's lunch after everyone's run out of the office. It's funny. I do recommend. I mean, yeah, once you've watched this, watch the British one too. It's pretty funny.
I wonder if they wanted to take from the Nero Wolfe books a little bit, or I guess Agatha Christie. I've never read any of that, but I gather that's very funny as well, which I never would have known. But Nero Wolfe, have you read any of that? Rex Stout, anybody?
Mm-mm.
It's fantastic. Oh, it's fantastic. Actually, a mutual friend of ours, Michael Canfield, turned me on to him, and I read. There's 50 books or something. I read them all, but they're very funny. And there's always a wisecracking detective who's always got a foil. He's got this foil who's very stoic, and he plays tricks on him. And there's one great line from the book. So this guy shows up, this gangster shows up, and he says, your name's Goodwin. And Archie Goodwin, the detective, says back to him, thanks. How much do I weigh?
Oh, so I was gonna say about the whole assistant thing. I don't know if anybody has read any of the Matthew Hughes short stories. He published a bunch of them in FNSF several years ago. But he had this whole series about a guy named Guth Bandar, and it takes place in this far future.
Yeah, I've read some of those. Yeah.
Have you? Okay, and so those were really interesting, and I love those stories. But I believe the term he uses it's they explore the collective unconscious. So it's this sort of shared dream space.
Yeah, it's
the
noosphere,
noosphere,
or something like that. Noosphere, yeah.
Yeah. And so as those progress, it becomes clear that there's certain archetypes that are at play, and one of them is, and so one of the I think it's the final story or something. It's called the hero and his helper. And so it's kind of a thing where it's there's always a hero, and he always has this assistant or helper. And so that reminded me of the whole Dirk Gently dynamic a little bit.
Yeah, I was reading an article recently that said that the reason, I always kind of wondered, why does every superhero have to have a sidekick? And I was reading an article recently that was saying, well, the reason that's true is because back when superhero, there was superhero stories, you could argue forever, but back when superhero stories were first popular on the radio, they had to have a way, the superhero couldn't always just be talking to himself about what he was going to do next, because that was weird. So they had to have some kind of not quite as powerful, not quite as bright guy there, or woman there for the superhero to explain everything to. So that's where the sidekick came from, and very much also Holmes and Watson, and then all the detectives always have that.
Yeah, I really like the other thing that I really like about the show is how much they sort of poke at the Sherlock-Watson relationship, where Watson is so, he idolizes Sherlock. In each iteration, he idolizes him to a large extent, and then he's the one taking down the notes on the cases and writing them up and making Sherlock famous, where Todd does nothing but resist this relationship until the end of the first season, and is so angry about having to help him for most of their relationship, and then obviously is not writing anything down.
Well, but I guess that's one sort of potential issue, I guess, with the holistic detective concept, is it means you're watching the detective never really do anything clever or solve anything or collect clues or anything, right? They're just kind of doing random stuff and it all works out somehow. I mean, do you think that makes it less, I don't know, does it make it less satisfying, or, is one holistic detective show good and you wouldn't want to watch two, or I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it makes it less satisfying to me. I mean, at least not the way the first season plays out. Although, as far as it being like Dirk Gently's holistic detective agency, it's like it's kind of interesting because like Dirk Gently doesn't really feel like he's the main character in the show. It feels like Todd's the main character. And I mean, that might be partially because Elijah Wood's actually, like a much more famous actor than the guy who plays Dirk Gently, but at least here, I don't know. I wasn't familiar with that guy beforehand, but I mean, it definitely feels like Todd is the main character. And so it actually kind of subverts that complaint, I think, a little bit in the sense that it's like, well, Todd isn't a holistic detective. They are just sort of blundering around figuring things out, but he's at least, not constrained by that same sort of thing that Dirk is of just sort of blundering around. Like he can at least like, think about it from a normal person's point of view. And so, yeah, I don't know, but it all works somehow together.
It doesn't bother me that he's a holistic detective instead of a brilliant detective. In fact, I really like it for the same reason I think a lot of people kind of put down the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy books and say, there's no plot. And I disagree. I think there's no physical plot, but I think there's a very strong metaphysical plot where Arthur goes through this series of scenes where he's confronted with this idea that the universe keeps doing these crazy things to him and he wants to get to the bottom of it. And he's confronted over and over again with all these characters who embody one side of this argument or the other, that if you do figure out what's going on, it's not going to make any sense to you because it was never intended to make sense to you. In fact, if you try really hard to figure out what's going on, you're just going to get made fun of harder and harder. And, like the guy who's like infinite, he can't die, and he just goes around insulting everybody. He's trying to make some kind of order in this nonsense universe that he's been faced with for eternity. And it's just thumbing its nose at him over and over again. And I think that's the plot of the Hitchhiker's Guide is, by the end of those books, Arthur finally figures out he has to just let go and enjoy it because it's really fun if you do that. Whereas if you keep trying to like make it fit into something, you keep just getting laughed at. And I think the Dirk Gently thing is the same way. It's like he's not a brilliant detective in the sense that he's not analyzing these things and coming up with these brilliant realizations. But in a way, he's making these other brilliant realizations that step completely off logic and go into the realm of, let go of all that stuff and get into the flow of things. And you're going to find things are going to work out a lot better for you that way. And they don't. I mean, he falls on his nose again and again and again, and everybody makes fun of him for it. But eventually he's right because he just keeps believing in that. He has enough faith to believe in that. And it kind of reminds me of a story you wrote a long time ago, Dave, The Black Bird, where there's this detective, and he's on this case, and he's got this black bird, and he's uncovering the layers on this bird. And the deeper he digs, the more he figures out. But then he digs so deep that he finds that he's inside the bird, and he ends up killing himself because he digs too deep.
Spoiler warning.
Oh man, I just made a lot of people angry. But I think I don't know. There's a parallel there where he doesn't go for the over analytical thing. In fact, he doesn't go for any analytical thing. He just goes with his gut, and I think that's kind of a satisfying path for him to follow, maybe more so than it would be if he was yet another brilliant guy figuring out all the details.
So wait, are you saying that he does dig deep or he avoids digging too deep?
Oh, I'm saying he doesn't dig at all. In fact, he's the antithesis of that. He doesn't want to do any digging whatsoever, but he does dig into the idea of, he digs very deeply into the idea of don't dig because these things are happening. And if you keep your mind open to it and you keep your senses alert, you're gonna get to where you need to be, even though you went in exactly the wrong direction.
Dude, you just blew my mind with that digging deeply into not digging thing. I'm gonna have to think about that one. Well, but actually that brings me to my other question I was going to ask about this holistic detective concept, which is, does it remove any of the tension, do you think, when you just know that everything's going to work out for Dirk Gently, right? Like, he's never going to get killed in season 2 or whatever, because the universe is always acting the way that it needs to advance his goals, right? Or is that not true?
Well, I think.
Well, it's also named after him, so it's like generally it's pretty safe to imagine that he's going to stay on the show. But I mean, that's like true of like a lot of shows where it's like, okay, he's the title character. He's not going to get killed. Obviously, I know that. Or like any book series where it has a long running character. It's like, well, obviously that one character isn't going to get killed. Or if it's like first person, it's like, well, that person's not going to die, So I don't know that inherently ruins that.
Leah, what were you going to say?
Oh, I don't think that he doesn't think that he can't die, which I think that for me is the way that I have, where I have that sort of tension, where everything that he goes into, he has no idea that the show's named after him. So he has the fear of potentially, getting killed by the guy in the steampunk time travel suit or whatever. So I'm able to sort of invest in that. And then also the show has built itself to have so many other things going on that even if the center, or the sort of titular center, I guess, is a little bit, where he's just sort of waiting for things to come to him, there's so many other more active plots going on around him that it doesn't matter. Like, I think the show has a really good balance between, him sort of waiting for clues and everyone else actively, running around trying to find clues.
Wait, so you think that Dirk Gently thinks that he can die? Because I feel like he always goes into these really dangerous situations with total aplomb because he just trusts in the universe or something.
Well, yeah, but I don't think that in his mind that, which he, again, a little bit into season 2, so I don't want to say too much, but, if he gets killed, then that's just what was supposed to happen. And he can't really do anything to stop it. So which to me, that adds a different level where, like, Todd is much more like, but I don't want that to happen. So he's going to do everything he can think of to not get killed, even if Dirk is dragging him into some ridiculous situation.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think he thinks he can die, but I think he's at peace with that. He just seems like and I think he could die in the book. I mean in the TV show, because there's a scene there where Fiona Dourif's character Bart, she tries to kill him, and then when she tries to kill him, Farrah Black is able to stab her, and she's hurt for the first time in her life, and then she starts speculating, well, maybe that's it. Maybe that's the end. The universe doesn't need me anymore. I've fulfilled everything, and I'm done now. And I think that could very much happen to Dirk, where he could fulfill his destiny and then it's over, which is a parallel theme to, was it the last, not the last, but one of the last books in the Hitchhiker series, Mostly Harmless, where they all do die. Spoiler alert. Sorry.
Well, the book's been out for a while.
but Ford, they've been about to die 50 times throughout the series, and Ford is always kind of okay with it. Arthur's always like stressed out, and Ford is always very Dirk Gently like. He's always like, hey, well, just try and hold your breath. If you fall from a skyscraper and you're about to hit the ground, swing your knees around, try and roll with it, or try to miss the ground if you can. But he's just always happy-go-lucky. And when they finally realize, no, we are really going to die now, and Arthur's like, well, aren't you, he's so stressed out about it. And he asks Ford, well, aren't you stressed out? He's like, no, he's still got the same attitude he always did. He really knows that this is it. We're not going to get rescued this time. And he's still got the same attitude he always had. Just like, hey, well, that's what's going to happen now. No big deal to him, I think.
I mean, doesn't Dirk Gently know in particular that he's not going to die in this story because he knows that he's eventually going to send the time machine back in time at the end of the story?
Good point.
Well, that's true.
Well, yeah, but then there's a little bit more after that.
Per season, yeah.
So, because, there is a time period after he does that he could still get killed, if I'm remembering right.
Well, right, but until he's sent the time machine back in time, he knows he's not going to die, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, after that, all bets are off.
Yeah, and actually, now that we've discussed all this, I kind of am anticipating that the show will kill him at some point, despite the fact that that he's the title character. At least in part because, you can still have Dirk Gently's detective agency even after Dirk Gently himself is dead, because it's still his detective agency that he founded or whatever. That exists in the real world. There's agencies that somebody started and then they die and then people continue it. They keep it going even with that name attached to it, even though that person's gone. But then also just because, hey, in this show, I wouldn't think twice about Dirk Gently dying and then eventually even coming back. I mean, who knows? What might happen?
Well, especially given, John, how prominently Ghost's characters feature in the radio drama.
Mm-hmm.
I could definitely see Dirk Gently spending season 3 as a ghost or something.
That would be sweet. I kind of hope they do kill him and then bring him back, kind of like a Buffy the Vampire Slayer thing, or like Gandalf.
Yeah, I like the idea of Dirk Gandalf. that would be epic.
All right, cool. So, we got about 10 minutes left. I guess I'm curious. Like, I guess people all think that this show has sort of a Douglas Adams-y feel to it. I think one of our listeners, maybe on Facebook, said that he didn't, or said that it didn't. But I don't know, Tom, as our resident Douglas Adams expert here, you think that this? How many? What would you give this on a scale of 1 to 10? Douglas Adams atmosphere.
Well, if I got to rate it just on Douglas Adams' atmosphere, I'd probably say around a 7. I mean, I love it. I should say that. I think, Douglas Adams is British humor. It's Monty Python. It's Terry Pratchett. It's, not British, but Robert Sheckley. It's that really just like off the wall, not really much of a plot, but really fun and really funny. I don't think this is hilariously funny. I think this is very funny, but in a different way. So I don't think it's got a really deep Douglas Adams aesthetic in that humor sense. But in terms of the underlying theme of the Dirk Gently books, and even of the Hitchhiker's book, that that I don't want to repeat myself with trying to say it short, but that you can't figure out what's going on, and if you try hard, it's just gonna make fun of you. But if you relax, you're gonna at least have fun, and if you're in the Dirk Gently world, you're also gonna arrive at the solution to the case. So I think it does great service to that theme, and I guess that's my answer.
See, John, did you ever say whether you got Christy to watch the rest of the show?
I did. Yeah. We watched the whole thing.
And what did she think of how Douglas Adams became by the end?
I don't recall us discussing that exactly. I mean, I know she had issues with it being very different than the books initially, but then by the end of it, she loved it. So, I mean, I imagine that she must think that it at least is Douglas Adams enough, because if it wasn't, I think she wouldn't have enjoyed it in the end. Yeah, and she definitely was fully on board by the time we got back to it and got through the end of it. So I would say she gives it full thumbs up, like Hitchhiker's Guide symbol, thumbs up.
See, Leah, do you want to say anything about Douglas Adams and this adaptation of Dirk Gently?
Well, I think it's a really interesting Americanization of Douglas Adams. Like, I think it is they sort of took the very British, sardonic kind of dark satiric humor, and they kind of put it into like more of an American blender where it gets more, it just becomes more outrageous. There's more violent slapstick that is sort of the dark humor comes out more in like the bullet going through the floor and hitting the wrong person, which in a certain light is really funny, but in another light is someone getting shot. So I really like that. And then I also, I think that they've sort of taken the absurdity and they've funneled it a little bit more into just a look at sort of violence, and also particularly with Todd, like the sort of desperate life that he's living of just barely scraping by on his pay as a bellhop and never having enough money for his health and everything, or for Amanda's health. That I thought that was a kind of an interesting way to sort of take this commentary and apply it to sort of an American, like trying to make it in an American city, basically. So if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like John, you were saying that this is maybe too violent for kids, right? Like, what are some of the I don't even remember it being particularly violent, but I'm American, so I'm totally inured to that stuff. I don't even notice it anymore.
Well, then the holistic assassin like just kills a bunch of people like several times.
Brutally. Like,
pretty brutally. Yeah.
And then she does she gets stabbed in the leg, which that's a very protracted scene of blood, and she's screaming in pain because she's never felt pain before. So then Ken has to deal with that.
Which again was funny. At the same time, it was horrifying.
Yeah, no, it's hilarious to watch her not process what's happened to her and then to watch him try to respond to it.
Do we have any idea what her backstory is? Because she's never been in a hotel before, and she's never eaten whatever.
She was from Blackwing as well, just like Dirk was. Because when they meet, she says something about they say at the same time, they start, talking speaking in tandem. And they say at the same time, "You're one of the other ones," and I think she made some reference to Blackwing in there. I don't know if she said it by name, but anybody else pick up on that or?
Not that I remember, because I know they haven't met. So wherever she was in the facility, whatever the facility was then, they never came across each other while they were both there, which I think is kind of. That's an interesting idea too. Like, how many rooms of people do they have that have never seen each other?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, don't they so Dirk is Project Icarus, and then don't they refer to her as something else? Like, they refer to her as one of the other assets that's out there, don't they? At some point.
Yeah, I think so. I don't remember what though, because then they also do. Well, again, a little bit of season 2. You get to see a few other of the projects in already. So I'm assuming a few more are going to crop up throughout the season.
So wait, did she escape, or is this the capacity that they're using her for? Because they send the whole army after her at the end of season 2, right? So she must have escaped.
Yeah, you would think.
I think so.
Although it's also unclear how Dirk is out too, right? I mean, because he's not doing what they want him to do.
Right.
Yeah, I think it was kind of like the fatherly FBI guy was very fond of him and was kind of holding everybody else, not FBI, but the Blackwing guy was holding everybody else in the organization back from coming down on Dirk with both feet. And then once he got killed, the more aggressive guy took over, or as he says, very erectus.
Well, yeah, I mean, it seems like there's going to be a lot of Blackwing in season 2, so presumably a lot of these questions will be answered if we keep watching.
Yeah, I hope so, but I also sort of hope that they don't go too hard with the Blackwing.
Yeah, I agree.
I was going to say, I mean, one thing that I thought was particularly interesting in terms of talking about it as Douglas Adams adaptation and such, is that one thing I was surprised about was how American it was, especially since this is a BBC America show. I mean, obviously BBC America, but it's a BBC thing. So it's I was expecting it to be more British, especially given it's based on Douglas Adams and stuff. But it feels like a very American show. So that was kind of surprising. I mean, it's even set in Seattle, so.
I mean, is Dirk generally the only British character? I'm trying to think.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so far into season 2, he still is. So.
Dave, I wanted to say that I said it was I give it a 7.5 on the Douglas Adams scale. I give it a 9, maybe 9.5 on a regular scale. I don't necessarily think making it more Douglas Adamsy would have made it better. I think I think what they did was almost every choice they made was brilliant. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think you're right about that in the sense that Douglas Adams is not one of those writers that you can really 100% faithfully adapt one of his things to a different medium and expect it to work the same way. There's some authors where it's no, you should totally just take what they wrote and just directly adapt it, and that's great. That's going to be the right thing to do. Whereas with him, I think it needs a little adaptation. I mean, even he himself changed things from when he wrote it for something first as a radio play, and then when he turned it into a book, or then when he turned it into a game or whatever. It's he understood that, and so I think it's actually good that they would take it and then actually adapt it rather than just try to strictly translate something. And in this case, obviously, they adapted it a lot.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Tom. I just love this show. Everyone, go tell your friends and spread the word because I think it's great. I want to see more of it. And we're all out of time, so I think I'm going to give Leah the last word here. So, Leah, final thought on Dirk Gently.
Oh, well, I think it's a brilliant show. I think everyone should be watching it. And I really hope that it gets more seasons because I really want to see where it can go from here if they're actually able to fully set up the detective agency. because I want to see more cases than just, one a season. So yeah, that is my hope for Dirk Gently.
All right, great. Yeah, so we've been speaking with John Joseph Adams, Leah Schnelbach, and Tom Gerencer. So guys, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that was our panel. So big thanks again to John Joseph Adams, Leah Schnelbach, and Tom Gerencer for joining us on the show. Big thanks as well to everyone who's given us 5 stars on iTunes, including Wang Ji in China and Puraille Lulun in France. Puraille Lulun writes, "Just listen, please. What an extraordinary effort to maintain the sci-fi and fantasy in dignity and respect. This is the podcast that made me love podcasts." So big thanks again to Puraille Lulun for that great review. Special thanks as well to Oliver Gerestein and Mark, who both just signed up this week to support us on Patreon. Geek's Guide to the Galaxy is made possible thanks to support from listeners like you. So if you enjoy the show and want it to continue, please sign up to give us $1 or $2 per episode over at patreon.com/geeks. And if you'd rather make a one-time contribution, you can do that via check or PayPal over at geeksguideshow.com/crowdfunding. And I want to give a special thank you to Aaron Brumley, who just made a very generous contribution to the show via PayPal. So big thanks again to everyone who's contributed. We really appreciate it. All right, so that was our show. So thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.
The Geek's Guide to the Galaxy is a production of Wired.com. For more information about the show, visit geeksguideshow.com. To learn more about your host, visit davidbarrkirtley.com. Music and voiceover produced by yours truly, Jack Kincaid. If you enjoyed this program, tell your friends. If you didn't enjoy it, tell no one. Thank you for listening.